So,
Okay.
all right. I think we are live and ready to go. This is Adam Seaman with Positive Leadership, and I am here with Jennifer Downing at Leadership South Coast. And this is our third installment. So that's pretty cool because, the first thing we did was you were getting ready to go into your retreat. This is almost like a reality show, right? So you're getting ready to go into your retreat. And it's the first time you're going to meet all the other bachelors and bachelorettes or survivors or whatever, and you don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to be cool? Are they going to be mean? You don't know. And so then it went great. And then you had your first month with authenticity. So we talked about it when you were heading into authenticity, and then we'll hear how it went. So it's kind of like, here's what you missed on the last episode. And then today we're going to talk about the purpose chapter and kind of get you, prepped for that. And then that'll be your next session. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Jennifer, on how did the last, your first monthly session with authenticity?
Yeah. Well, topic-wise, we focused on economic development in February. So the capacity of authenticity just went really well with that because we had some politicians joining us that day. We had leaders, CEOs from chambers of commerce working in the business industry, other economic development leaders. So it was interesting. So we were able to kind of thread that throughout the day in between sessions, and I could see participants having individual conversations throughout the day where the idea behind, the authenticity was definitely part of their conversation. But we did carve out 1 hour early in the day before we dove into economic development to talk about positive leadership. And, the chapters really, the material just speaks for itself. So, again, I try not to get up in front of the class and just regurgitate all the principles, but rather throw the questioning out to the group, assuming they've read it, they've come to the class prepared and they're ready to discuss. And in our case, they were. It was a really lively discussion. We watched the Fred Rogers video that is on the resource page on the Positive Leadership website, and everybody loved that video. I have some in our class that are younger and actually aren't familiar with Fred Rogers, and then I have some that are 80s children, 90s children that kind of remembered Fred Rogers. So it was a great video, kind of nostalgic for some people. But we all felt that it just really exemplified that the idea of authenticity so well. And so I would say that that's a great tool to use and would encourage others to use it because it's available. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, we're also applying the talent to strength model. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I took a exercise that you have suggested where I had everybody break up into their project team groups and think about what their top 5 talents are and hone in on just one of those talents. So kind of identify what their favorite was and think about from their place of authenticity what the purpose of that theme is and how they might apply that in their project work. And so I just allowed them to discuss that as a group, and then we shared some of the themes that came up in their conversation. Unfortunately, some of that material, some of that exercise got cut short because we had speakers coming in. So I'm planning on bringing that exercise again into our March program day, just kind of like to be continued because it will relate to the next theme as well, which we're talking about today. Purpose.
Yes, it does. It fits in very well with purpose. Good. Go on.
So yeah, overall it was a really great discussion, and the group really led it themselves. I didn't really have to do much to keep it going or even to get it started. People really like this theme, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, they love authenticity. It's one of the most popular ones. Everybody connects with it. But I think you'll find this continuing throughout. The other capacities will hit people differently. So a couple questions, based on what you shared. So did you feel like, did I use my pinball metaphor with you for facilitating?
You did, yeah.
Did I do that when we were filming this so other people will have seen it if we talk about it?
I think so, yeah. I remember you using that.
Yeah, you launched the pinball as your question, and your job isn't to keep working the bumpers, because the more you work the bumpers, the more chance you have, the flippers, I'm sorry. You're working too hard if you're flipping too much. You want that ball to bounce off the bumpers, and your participants are the bumpers. And the more points, the more it bounces among them and they talk, the more it scores. So did you feel like it was like kind of like automatic, the conversation was just flowing and you didn't have to work too hard to keep it going?
Well, I didn't, but I did come prepared. So I had questions that I had asked them to reflect upon after they read the chapter, and I tried to bring those questions into the discussion. But I also came into the discussion with my own experience. So obviously I had read the chapter. I tried to do some of the exercises in the field guide prior to us coming together so that I could share my story. And one of the exercises that I had done myself was the 100 Things About Me.
Yeah,
exercise.
right.
So I brought that into the conversation. It was really challenging for me to do. And so I brought that story and experience into the group. And the other thing, I shared a story about when I had applied for a job where I really, really wanted the position, and prepared so hard for it in terms of taking notes and having cards ready for my presentation. And when I got into the interview, I never even touched the cards, never even looked at my notes. Everything just kind of came out of me. And it was just a sign that it was really, truly part of who I was, that I was being authentic, that I knew the material, I didn't need any notes. And so I shared that experience with them too. And so just kind of sharing a couple of things just got, set the pinball into motion. And from there, it really kind of took on a life of its own, the discussion. So
I just think that's so fantastic. I mean, that's the most important point of all of this for me, is that you're modeling those behaviors. I mean, you're being authentic while you're talking about authenticity. You're sharing stories, and you could share a story of when you weren't authentic too, or whatever. And everybody can relate to these things. So that's something that, as people are facilitating, for anybody watching this video, for example, you don't have to have like the book memorized or the concepts. You just have to really just be authentic and put it out there. And I think you're doing the same thing, even though it's a little different. Talent to strength. Not everybody who has positive leadership is using the Strengths Finder talent to strength materials. But I like how you drew from that to bring it in. But I loved that you used the 100 Things About Me activity, which is in the field guide for authenticity. And you could go into, that's how you could use the field guide, is just do one of those activities yourself and then share it with the group and what the results were, and how it relates to authenticity. And maybe other people want to go and do that activity because the participants have access to that field guide.
Right. And I want to point out too that I intentionally did not give the field guide beforehand. I just gave the chapter for them to read, and it's referenced in the chapter that there is a field guide. So I made sure to say when we were together that I'm going to now share the field guide with you now that you know the concepts of this chapter. We've talked about it. Now you're better positioned to actually do some of these exercises. And so I actually gave them not required homework, but suggested homework.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I suggested that they do the user's manual. I think that's part of authenticity.
Yeah.
I asked them to do it within their project team. So next time your project team gets together for a meeting or a call, to do that together as a team.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, it helps align everybody up front on how we're going to work together. And so doing it at the beginning is great. I know not every program uses the field guide. I think there's an echo. Are you hearing an echo?
A little bit, but I think it just cleared up.
Okay.
No?
Not on my end. Let me just try to reset it real quick.
Okay.
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 I don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened.
All right, I'm just going to try to power through. Hopefully it's just the echo on my end and not anybody else's end. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, let's see, I was just making a point. I forgot what it was. About having them do the user's manual right up front. I think that's really going to be great for them. And the fact that you're weaving that in. Now, not every program uses project teams. Some programs do that and others don't, but if you do, it's a great exercise for that. So there's just all these resources, and I liked how you're using them. And you're just kind of, there's no prescription, there's just some suggestions that I'm giving you and that you could, customize it. One last question before we get into today's content on purpose. Did you find that the theme emerged even after you talked about it? So you did the authenticity discussion in the morning. Did you find like your guest speakers talk about it? Or at the end of the day, did you do a recap about what people liked or didn't like? And they brought it up, so.
Yeah, I did share with all of our speakers the summary, but did not require them to speak to it. I just said that this is something extra that we're doing. If you want to bring it into your talking points, you can. I actually had one, a mayor who joined us, talked about it a bit, just for a few moments. But we did have time later in the day. We had quite a bit of discussion panels, a lot of information load in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we actually did a really fun visit to the downtown New Bedford Harbor. It's a working waterfront, so we got to kind of experience, in terms of economic development, a major industry that's fueling the local economy. So we took a boat tour, and it was really fun. And we had some time during that to talk about how did you see authenticity play out today or not. And yeah, people had some things to say about it. So yeah, we did try to wrap up the day with it, just so that there was some closure.
That's great. Well, it sounds like it was a really successful day. And so just really glad to hear that things are going to a great start. So with that, I thought we could jump into talking about purpose. So real quick, before I start getting into the PowerPoint, what I want to show you is the website here, where you would log into your account, and then from there, so here you logged in, you choose leader, and then it takes you to this screen where it lists all the different sections. And then here, if you click on purpose, it'll take you right to here, where it's the purpose resources. And so you have the chapter, you have the field guide, and participants get both of those under the participant level. But then you have the PowerPoint, which is what I'll talk about here. And then you have a 2-page summary of purpose, which you could share with guest speakers. Don't share it with your class, otherwise that's all they're going to read. And then there's just some resources here, some articles that you could look at that I think touch on purpose, and see if any of that is something you want to bring about into your discussion. And then also some videos, like you use Mr. Rogers' video for authenticity. There's a couple here. One, this is a new one I added, the 5 phrases that could change your life. It's chock full of purpose, but also the other capacities. It's about a 15-minute TED Talk, so that might be a little bit more than what you want. But you could watch it for inspiration, or you could pull out a clip from that. This is a really great video a lot of programs have used. This is from the movie Hugo, which I had never watched the whole movie. I've tried, but this clip here is really, really good. It's all about purpose, or as the kids say, it has these precocious kids in there, and they talk about purpose, because they have that like British accent. So it's purpose, not purpose, American style. But still, it's like really it's kind of interesting, and a very provocative section there. And then this is another thing that I added recently too. I was just watching some clips about the Hunger Games. I'm a really big fan of the books and the movies too. And so here's Donald Sutherland, who is playing like the main villain, a really, really bad character. And he's being interviewed about why he played the character. And it wasn't like, oh, he needed an acting job and he auditioned for it. He aggressively went after this part for a very specific reason. And he talks about it in this video. And I'm going to leave it there. It's worth watching. It's just a few minutes. Here's a little activity for mingling that I haven't even looked at in a while. So these are all just ideas and resources you could use. I just wanted to show people that. And then, of course, using the field guide for exercises if you want to do another activity before the session and talk about doing it, what your experience was doing it. I think that's a great thing to do. So with that, I thought I would just open up. Do you have any questions or comments on that, Jennifer?
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Good. So we shall get into this here. And my plan is we would just talk about it, and you can interrupt me at any point, redirect me or whatever if I'm taking too long, talking too long, not making sense, any of this stuff I'm accused of doing. So again, with the PowerPoints, I don't think you should use the whole PowerPoint. I developed this for my youth group when I don't have them read the chapters because they got enough reading to do. So I just wanted a complete enough version of the PowerPoint that I could talk them through and they would get the essence of the chapter. You probably wouldn't have time to do this whole PowerPoint, or you probably wouldn't need to or want to. But
I want to just point out too, sorry to interrupt, but I used during our retreat when I was introducing positive leadership, talking about social force, I used a PowerPoint effectively. Like I felt like it supported the conversation very well. I prepared a PowerPoint for for authenticity, I'm sorry. I didn't use it much. I felt like I didn't need to use it. The conversation just took on a life of its own. The group was prepared with all of the concepts and ideas in the chapter, and I didn't end up using it.
That's
so
great.
So I think, just wanted to bring that up, as you may not feel compelled to use a PowerPoint at all. And you don't have to use a PowerPoint, I guess.
And I would even take it further. I would say if you don't have to use the PowerPoint, that's better. If you have what you described as that conversation, and my students call it popcorning, like the participants are popcorns and they just are excited with ideas and things to share. That's way better than using a PowerPoint. So definitely don't use a PowerPoint because I'm showing it to you. I'm just doing this now to kind of teach you and the viewers just some of the key things. I'm just doing a guided tour of the purpose chapter. That's the only reason I'm using the PowerPoint. Don't feel like you have to use it. If you don't have to use it, that's even better. So right on with what you said. All right. So, but I do like to show this slide sometimes because it reminds people where we are in the model, that this is about more than just the capacities, that it's about social force and how social force is what links the self, you as the individual, your participants, to the broader community. And that I use social force as my way of talking about leadership. And that's what's different about positive leadership, is that we don't talk about it as a position or a role or a title. We don't talk about leadership as a set of personality traits. That leadership is the social force that that you already have, but you can amplify, and that's what the capacities are for. So the test for each capacity is, if I am high in that capacity, will that increase my social force? So the question for a purpose is, if I am clear on my purpose, does that increase my social force? Does that increase the availability that people have to what I'm doing and get them on board? Does it inspire them, engage them? Does it allow me to take actions that evoke positive reactions from other people? That's the essence of the whole thing. And so that's the test for each capacity. Does it help me increase my social force? And I think, yes, I think purpose does. But you can have that conversation with your participants, and we'll get into more of that here. So, before, like, what I would do is I might recap authenticity, because there's a real nice flow from authenticity into purpose that really, even though they're separate concepts, there's a lot of integration and overlap there. So I just want to remind people about, authority versus leadership, obligatory versus discretionary effort, social force, operator versus technician, all concepts from the introduction. And then, get into authenticity and just some questions like, what's the difference between pretense, sincerity, and authenticity? Or what are the 4 aspects of authenticity? Self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-development, and self-assertion. and just to talk through those to kind of keep it fresh on people's minds. And then, have you experienced any examples since we last met about authenticity? And it's just fun to hear whatever stories people might bring up, because, you know, they'll be like, yes, I totally saw this, and here's an example. And it really, you know, if you get any of those, that really makes it an engaging conversation. Mm-hmm. So then, you know, what I do with my high school students is I take these chapters from the beginning of or questions from the beginning of the chapter to just kind of help people, do a little self-assessment and think about it a little bit, but also this is an outline for the chapter. These questions flow with the general flow of the chapter. So it's almost like a table of contents at the same time that it's a little mini self-assessment. So scale of 1 through 7, 7 being the highest. I have a clear understanding of how purpose relates to leadership. Maybe I don't have any clue. Maybe I have a very strong clue, but just, I've never really thought about that relationship. Mm-hmm. I am skilled at identifying purpose in various contexts, whether it's what's the purpose of a project? What's the purpose of this meeting? What's the purpose of this relationship? What's the purpose of this pen? You know, I mean, like, not that people do that, but it's just interesting to think about. Purpose is already there. We just ignore it, you know? Mm-hmm. I clarify the purpose of my tasks, my activities, my commitments before commencing them. I just think that, you know, this fits well with the Strengths Finder idea, like with the responsibility theme. People with the responsibility theme might just automatically accept a task or a commitment without really understanding the purpose. Why? Why are we doing this? What's behind it? What is this meant to accomplish? I've identified a personal purpose that is particular and meaningful to me, and this is really a great tie-in to the authenticity, because there's this element of personal purpose. When things get overwhelming or out of control, I consciously consult my personal purpose. What am I about? Why am I doing this? I think this is such a useful tool or question, because we just get pulled in so many different directions that if we just ever get confused or overwhelmed, we just need to stop and say, wait a minute, let me return to the purpose. Purpose is like home. It's like the starting place on the Monopoly board. It's that thing that, you know, you just know it. It helps you know where you are and orient to your surroundings better if you just come back to purpose and get clear on purpose. It eliminates so many things that are distractions. And it also feeds into, you know, when things get overwhelming, that foreshadows the resilience chapter. That purpose is a tool to help you be more resilient. So there's a lot of backtracking you could do. When you get to the later capacities, they all come back to the earlier ones. Authenticity will help with resilience, for example. And exploring those relationships once you unfold the model a little bit more is really cool. And then to think in bigger picture, my organization has articulated its purpose and actively uses it to guide the activities. And it aligns with my purpose. Just several questions in there worth considering. Is my purpose aligned with my company's? I had a friend who was applying for a job and she got accepted for this job. I won't say the industry, but she's like, that industry is a crooked industry. It just doesn't reflect my values, you know? So she declined the job. There's this idea that an organization might talk about its purpose, but then its actual behaviors contradict that. I think that's worth looking at. On the last one, and this is, I kind of do this with each capacity, is it's not just for your developing the capacity within you, but also trying to develop it in people around you. So I raise awareness in others about purpose of our organization, our projects, our meetings, or I encourage them to identify their personal purpose. So these are all kind of questions that could, you know, you could just do your whole discussion with these, you know? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So any thought, did you use this at all with authenticity or find these?
I didn't do it in the class discussion, but I encouraged them to take the quiz when I sent the chapter beforehand. I had, like I said, I sent them a few reflection questions that I think I pulled from the field guide, and then encouraged them to take the self-assessment. So
yeah. So yeah, we do have questions in what's called the implementation manual.
Oh, I'm sorry. The implementation guide.
Yeah. which is, I'm glad you brought it up because I forgot all about it, that for those programs that are using positive leadership, there's a guide that kind of talks through the whole process, and it does give ideas for some of those reflection questions.
Right.
Good. And I always encourage people, come up with your own. Like, those are just sample questions. And everything in here, even these questions on the screen, are just ideas. You know, if you want to take it in a different direction, if it triggers a thought for you, then I encourage that, to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the subtitle of purpose is direction comes from within. And I think you can just think about that in a different way. What does that mean that direction comes from within? So I might show the Hugo clip here. You know, you see it's a reminder for me to show that clip before I get into things, just to kind of prompt, some discussion. And then for every chapter, I do my purpose and outcomes. Purpose of this chapter is to emphasize the purpose of an essential component of leadership for both individuals and communities. I think I misworded that, but you could read it more accurately there. The outcome I'm looking for is to heighten meaning your participants' appreciation for purpose in personal and professional leadership, or in personal and professional contexts. That's what I'm hoping happens. And then I always like to try to weave in a little quote. I love quotes. So purpose is that deepest dimension within us, our central core or essence, where we have a profound sense of who we are, where we came from, where we're going. Purpose is the quality we choose to shape our lives around. And purpose is a source of energy and direction. So just something to think about. For some people, that might be a little woo-woo or whatever word they want to use to dismiss it. For other people, that might really resonate. So to each his own. What is purpose? For me, it's about coming down to answering the questions why. Why do we do things? Why does something exist? Why does something need to be done? Why are we having this meeting? Why are you and I on this call right now? There's just that question. It gets to why, the origins of something. And so, I might have them discuss what's the connection between purpose and authenticity. I don't know if I have an answer for that here, but just to help tie the pieces together. I guess I do answer the question. As our authenticity increases, we rely less on society for scripts for answers. And it allows our direction to come from within. We develop the ability to see purpose in the background and draw it forward. That's really where purpose lives. It lives in the background. So if part of the capacity for purpose is to be able to discern purpose, to even think, to ask purpose, and then to discover it and then bring it forward so that other people can pay attention to it. That's really the capacity.
You have one without the other in this. I see them so dependent upon each other. Mm-hmm. Authenticity and purpose.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that the more authentic you are, the more your purpose becomes clear, or it could work the other way. The more clear you are about your purpose, the more it might pull you to be more authentic. Mm-hmm. And say, you know what? That's not like me. Maybe a younger Adam or a younger Jennifer might have done this or that, but now that I'm more authentic, I know who I am, I know what I'm about.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, for example, does a conversation have a purpose? Does an object have a purpose? You could just see purpose in all kinds of things around us. Mm-hmm. And that a leader's job is to recognize purpose, make it clear to others, and remind them when they lose sight of it. And so in order to really be an effective leader, you yourself have to, have a more developed relationship with purpose, because if you're not, if a leader is not remembering purpose or focusing on purpose, it's not likely the rest of the community will be either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I kind of have these two images, like this is supposed to be a piñata, but it's a diamond because the diamond is sort of like meant to be the icon for purpose in this chapter. So it's a big piñata, and she's standing there with a stick, and she's blindfolded because that's what makes piñata fun. You're like, haha, look at that person. They're exerting all this effort and making all these swings, but they're not hitting anything. And then you get this big surprise when they finally do hit it. And so people go through life making a lot of motions, and that's really what I'm trying to communicate here is there's a difference between motions and action. And this is what action's like. It's much more informed by purpose. Motion and action are both movement. They look similar. We sometimes think we're taking actions when in our lives when we're just making motions.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between a motion and an action is purpose. And that's kind of symbolized by removing the blindfold. And you hit the piñata and good stuff falls out. In this case, diamonds. So that's what I'm trying to communicate there with imagery. Not sure how well it works, but that's that. So I in this chapter spent a lot of time looking at 3 vantage points to think about purpose. So the first one is what I call original purpose. And this is basically that everything has a purpose, a reason why it exists in its origin, in its creation. Just there's a purpose behind it. And people might go to kind of spiritual, philosophical, or religious places with that. That's not how I intend it, but I'm not against that either. I'm just coming at it from a philosophical place that, you know, when you really think about it, everything does have a purpose. And personal purpose is the next vantage point. And that's about, I also would call it authentic purpose, personal purpose. And that's our own individual expression of purpose. What is my unique purpose? Who am I? And what is my purpose here? And the Greek philosophers thought about this a lot. They have a word for it, eudaimonism, probably more words than that, but it was a big, big, big part of living a meaningful life. It's why I think it was Plato said it, the unexamined life is not worth living, meaning you haven't found your purpose. And then the idea of the philosopher king was the person who most fully realized his or her purpose, and probably his in this society, his purpose, and fully developed it is kind of what would be involved with being the philosopher king. And that person would model for other people how to explore their own purpose, which would be different. We all have different purposes, but what does it look like to identify your purpose and live your life in accordance to that? As opposed to, I'm just living for pleasure, or I'm just living to make money, or I'm living for my career, or I'm even living for this person. It's more about what is it that, is imprinted uniquely into me that I want to give expression to over the course of my life. Mm-hmm. It was very, very big, occupying idea for them. And then the third vantage point is situational purpose. And this is not as exciting or, as flashy as a personal purpose. It's just, I'm driving in my car. What's my purpose? To arrive safely on time at this place. I'm waking up in the morning, and what's the purpose of my morning routine is to, get myself in shape for the day, to think about the day or whatever. I'm eating a meal. What's my purpose for eating this meal? Is it to just engorge myself with as much as I can, the way I sometimes eat? Is it I'm nourishing my body and providing it energy? It's good. The way you conceive of the purpose will shift, will affect what happens from there, all that follows. I agree, not the sexiest of the 3, but it is the one that, particularly in community leadership, is so, so important. And there's so many times you're working in a team or a group, and you've got a purpose that's brought you together. Maybe you're advocating against something. And so often as you're working together in a group, you lose sight of that purpose. Mm-hmm. And people go off on these various journeys and get further away from what brought them together in the first place. So I've seen that. I mean, that's so important to be able to understand situational purpose and to be able to stay grounded there. And how do you do that? And the first is kind of just develop that the capacity for asking that question and thinking about it and raising it. How many nonprofits take on programs that aren't really related to their purpose, and then they get too big and they're spread too thin, and they're not able to really, what happens is you're dividing your resources among different initiatives, and some may not have relevance to your purpose. So you're taking away from your true purpose those resources, and you're spreading them out into other areas. And we do this in our life too, we have all these things that distract us, that aren't as important, that take energy away from us. And so, no one's going to manage our purpose but ourselves. And yeah, I guess I'm talking about personal purpose, where you were talking about situational purpose, but they all just intertwine and interrelate with each other. So, yeah, so this is a very important part of the chapter. This idea of looking at purpose from these vantage points. Are there other vantage points? Yeah, probably. I just haven't thought of them, or they just didn't strike me. And I thought this was a way to break purpose down into, different little sections to think of it more. And that's a lot of what I do in positive leadership is I take something and I break it down into pieces. And I do that with authenticity, and I'll do that with the other chapters, so that we take this general concept, purpose or authenticity or resilience or advocacy, and what I'm trying to do is break them up into pieces, so that, and hopefully the relevant pieces, so that your participants can really think about it and angle in on it more than it just being this general overarching concept. Because I know purpose isn't new to anybody. I know authenticity isn't new to anybody, but those words just mean so many things, and they're so general that I don't know how to make them actionable, or how to turn them into a discipline or a capacity, or how to use that to make things happen around me. And this is what I'm trying to do in the Positive Leadership book. I don't say that enough, but that's really what's going on. And here's my attempt at purpose, to really break it down so we can get a little more insight into what it is and angle in on it a little bit more. So, I talk about each one, and I won't necessarily go through this, but just the idea that original purpose is about surviving and thriving. And you got to survive first before you can thrive. If you have a newborn baby, you're not planning on its college. You're making sure that baby has, is breathing, is eating, the survival comes first, and then you can worry about the thriving. And I've seen organizations that are focused on the thriving, and they don't even acknowledge the surviving part. I mean, there's like stories of some of these banks in the recent recession we had, that they were buying, Lear jets and custom jets and decorating their offices, and then, they weren't even surviving. And this is a failure of leadership. This is when a community no longer survives, to me, it's an absolute failure of leadership. So survival and then thriving, and not the other way around. But if you can have both, great. So a little bit on original purpose, and then personal purpose, just some thoughts I'll put out there. What is it, and how is it different from original purpose? So I'm surviving. I'm kind of thriving. So it depends on the day, I guess. But when I'm fulfilling my personal purpose, that's probably when I'm thriving. That's when I'm excited. That's when I'm energized. That's when I'm at my best version of myself. And when I'm distracted from my purpose, I'm not living up to my potential. I'm not being the fuller version of myself. Any thoughts on any of these? I don't want to,
Well, when you were talking about original purpose, thank you. I just thought about how so many cities and towns, have real complex issues and serious issues like poverty and homelessness and all of these really bad, horrible issues, right? And yet they are trying to revitalize their downtown and, trying to do all these other things that are so up here to thrive, but yet have not even thought about how they're going to address some of these real systemic issues. So that's kind of what came to my mind when you were talking about original purpose, surviving and thriving.
So good. I mean, it's so relevant. I mean, look in Michigan, in Detroit, and then recently in Flint, Michigan, they're building stadiums in Detroit and
right.
all these sport teams. And then the whole industry is just underneath it. And we experience that here in Tulsa. We're a very energy-oriented industry, and all the oil and gas companies have moved down to Houston. And so our leaders really began focusing on, well, where do we supplant that? Where do we support it? And so our focus has been on entrepreneurism. And Tulsa's considered, a lot of people don't know this, it's considered one of the best cities in the world for entrepreneurs to get started. There's a whole ecosystem that's meant to support entrepreneurship. And so our community leaders were really thinking about this and planning for it. And then you think about Flint, Michigan, where we're going to save a little bit of money, and then oh man, and it's getting worse that they found out that city officials knew about this a year before they went public. You know, they were providing government workers in Flint, Michigan with bottled water because they knew the water wasn't safe. Just bad stuff. I'm so glad you raised that. There's a lot there. And this isn't party specific. I try to be like, I have my partisan views, but when I talk about, but I don't use positive leadership as the forum for that. So, you know, it's not about a party specific thing. It is, we have a real failure of leadership across the board. Almost smacked my monitor.
Right.
How much but coming back to personal purpose, and then what are signs that you're following your personal purpose? How do you know when you're on your purpose? I think that would just be a good question for people to ask themselves. How do you know when something is purposeful for you? How do you know when you've really strayed from your purpose? You know, because there's no shortage of distractions in life. There's no shortage of things that we could get caught up in, and you know, entertainment is probably one of the biggest threats to purpose. And I'm a huge entertainment consumer. I'm a consumer. You know, we're all consumers. That's how much of our consumption is purposeful. Just something to think about.
Yeah.
And then situational purpose. So, you know, just talk about this every situation. You can just play a game called "What's the purpose of this situation?" And as you go through the day, you know, there'll be different things. But it's this last question that I think is really interesting. Are situational purposes created or discerned? Or is purpose in general, whether it's not just situational, but whether it's personal purpose, do you create that or do you discover it? Or original purpose. The original purpose is pretty straightforward. It's survival and thriving, you know. But I'm just going to answer this here because I really have a belief here. I think that purpose is not created. I think it is by us, at least. I think it's discerned. I think we have, it's there underneath it, and we just sort of have to kind of dust aside and then reveal it. And I think that sounds like I don't know how it strikes other people, but it's a very important point. It's really at the heart of this capacity for purpose is learning to discern it. You don't create it, you discover it. So another question I like when it comes to situational purpose is, what is it really time for now? Is it time for me to start watching Game of Thrones, or is it time for me to work on this thing here? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just Game of Thrones time, you know, but or whatever your favorite show is. But sometimes you're doing something when it's not really time for that now.
Right.
Why does purpose matter? I believe it amplifies social force. I think it maximizes your effort. I think of things that just aren't very purposeful for me, and I'm putting in the minimal effort. I'm not really giving it my all. And I did this thing, and I spent the time doing it, but I didn't really maximize it. I think it keeps us focused because I personally wrestle with this. I get very distracted easily. I love tangents and making connections. And then I just have to remember what's my purpose, and it kind of helps bring me back into focus. Mm-hmm. And I need to be using this more. I'm just thinking through things now, and I'm like, wow, yeah, I mean, I got so many irons in the fire and things I'm excited about, and then I'm not getting anything done because I'm trying to do everything. And then it's just like, okay, bringing it back to the purpose. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Purpose is powerful for communication too. I mean, you know, sometimes we just beat around the bush, or we don't really have our thoughts succinct, and we're not really clear. And so we can't really advocate, which is the next capacity, effectively, if we're not clear on our own purpose. Mm-hmm. So I think it helps us overcome difficulties and challenges and setbacks, because if I don't have a purpose that's meaningful for me, then I'll give up the first time something becomes inconvenient for me.
Right.
You know, I'm not as resilient, you know. So purpose keeps us in the game. It helps us go the extra mile and take the extra step and all that, dig deep, all those little expressions we have. Purpose really helps us with that. And it provides a competitive advantage. If two equal people or equal organizations are competing in something, but one is driven by a more meaningful purpose, I think that provides that entity with a real advantage. Something to really drive them and motivate them. And if you look at any motivational movie, like, you know, Remember the Titans or Rudy or any of those feel-good movies, you know, it's always that underdog, any underdog story, it's that purpose that evens the playing field and actually gives them that edge. All right. So any thoughts before I move on?
Nope.
Very good. So a couple of principles. Purpose has 3 requirements. One, that you discern it, and there he is. He's got his pick, and he finds the diamond. And then that you articulate it, and that you fulfill it. That's what purpose demands. Purpose demands that, you know, it's a question to which there's an answer. It's, why does something exist? And then bringing it to its fruition, to realize that that purpose. And so for leadership, I think in terms of like organization, what is discerning our purpose, articulating it so others can know what it is, and then mobilizing to fulfill that purpose. In a relationship, discern the purpose of this relationship. There's this great little thing I came across one time. It was like really motivating. It's called Seasons, Reasons, or Lifetime. You can Google it. And the idea that some relationships are there for a reason. There's a reason why, and when that reason is done, so is the relationship. And then some relationships are there for a season. You know, it's not really a particular purpose, but it's for this period of your life. And then when that season's over, just like when fall or winter's over, it moves on to the next season. And I don't know why I'm acting all like flowery about it. But, and then lifetime. And some relationships are just a lifetime relationship. You know, you're going to be together until one of you dies. And so, you know, every relationship has a purpose. And so these are the 3, this is the essence of this capacity of purpose, being able to discern it, being able to articulate it, and being able to fulfill it. If it's your purpose, if it's meant for you. Some purposes are other people's, you know what, that's not mine to fulfill. Or sometimes I've taken ownership of it and it is mine to fulfill. And so how do we nurture and care for and be good guardians of that purpose?
I think each one of these principles, if you're thinking about situational purpose, for instance, or organizational purpose, I should say, it's a lot easier to discern it, but probably a lot more challenging to articulate and fulfill. Whereas with personal purpose, I see where it could be more challenging to discern. But yet once you understand it, the articulation and fulfillment probably becomes much easier. So it's just interesting how these play out depending on what kind of purpose you're coming from. That makes sense.
I think that makes excellent sense. So all 3 of these elements related to original purpose, personal purpose, or situational purpose. And then it gets very rich that way. Just one thing you said.
Situational, I should say. I was calling it organizational, sorry.
But
situational.
Yeah, but still viable, like just because I don't use that word organizational purpose, that is a thing, and you can apply all these principles to that vantage point as well. But you raised something that I just think is an interesting question. What is the difference in a person's life when they are living based on a realization, a discernment of their purpose, an articulation of that purpose, and a fulfillment of that purpose, versus a life that never discerned its purpose?
Oh.
Right? I mean, this is
right. And I
like,
think a lot of people are in a situation where they don't know their purpose.
and,
They really don't.
and what does our society do to help organize people that way? That was the intention of education. And education was meant, well, first of all, it was only for the wealthy. It was only if you could afford a tutor, but it was all meant for edification of your life, of your experience, and understanding and appreciating life more. Now, our entire educational system, just about, is a vocational training system. It's very, very different than the original purpose of education.
Mm.
There's a great talk on YouTube by one of my favorite, I love this guy. His name is Wes Cecil. He's a faculty member at like a university in Seattle area or some around there. And he does these fantastic lectures, and he does one on education. It's part of his, I think it's part of his Myths of the American Mind series. No, it was part of his Humane Arts series. Fantastic, highly recommend it. But it talks all about this. So yeah, just that difference in a purposeful life versus a non-purposeful life. And I just think that conversation would really hit people in your program really, deep.
Right.
All right. So so this is a kind of fun little slide I use. And this is where I start talking about how purpose helps create alignment. So this is how some organizations look, like they're all bumping into each other. And then some organizations are very well aligned and, everyone knows their role and everybody's moving in the same direction. You can sort of picture a flock of seagulls, moving together versus this chaos here on the left. So the idea is if for being here, this is what it means to align purpose. So if I can discern purpose and then articulate it, I can begin creating alignment. Because if you've ever had drama, one of the main reasons we experience drama is we're not aligned on purpose. My why and your why are not aligned. They're at crossroads. So one of the real powerful things about purpose is that it helps us create alignment with our team, with our people, with our resources, versus this image, of things working crossways and being disorganized. So, this is another reason why purpose is important for leadership and how it amplifies social force. Because your social force is diminished when people are operating across different purposes than you. Mm-hmm. So just another very interesting point. And alignment is such a critical aspect of my work, and whether it's the Strengths Finder or whether it's positive leadership, at the core of all of it is how do we create alignment?
Yeah. Well, and that's social change work, I think, in general. This is so important when you're trying to address a very complex issue that has so many different implications, and you've got various partners around a table all coming from a different place, and maybe with different intentions or ideas. How do you come to a place of aligned purpose so that you can move forward? And I'm not totally sure of the answer to that, but I know we always try various models and strategies to figure it out. But
well, one thing is the conclusion chapter for positive leadership. There's a lot of things I wanted to focus on, but really that conclusion chapter is all about alignment. That's the main function of that purpose or of that chapter. That's the purpose of that chapter. So, I would recommend if this, how do we create alignment? Purpose is important, authenticity is important, advocacy is important. But when we get to the end, I wanted to tie it all together because I guess what I'm saying is I think fundamentally the role of leadership is to create alignment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to be able to do that and in each capacity is a piece of alignment and helps you get there.
Right.
So big ideas that I want to get to, but one capacity at a time. So and this actually foreshadows the alignment chapter. Every endeavor Everything we could do as people has three elements: our purpose, the why we're doing it; the outcomes, which is what it looks like on the other end when you've fulfilled purpose, discern purpose, articulate purpose, and fulfill it. Well, outcomes are what it looks like when it's fulfilled. Mm-hmm. So it's the future projection of a completed purpose. That's what outcomes are. And that's where you get into details of what does it look like, measurements, ways you can measure it, ways you can really feel and see that it's been realized. If our purpose is to change public opinion on something, if our purpose is to launch a program, then you can say, what are the outcomes that tells us we've changed public opinion? What are the outcomes that tells us we've successfully implemented a program? And then in between purpose and outcomes are methods, the how. How are we going to go about it? Here's the thing. Most people, if you ever watch groups work, what they do is they start with methods first. It's uncanny. Let's do this. Let's go about it this way. Let's do this thing.
So true. Yeah.
And it's like, how do you know what method will work if you don't know the outcome you're trying to achieve? And how do you know the outcome you're trying to achieve if you don't know the purpose for doing something?
Right.
So I teach this to my high school students, and I drill it, and they're probably sick of me. And when I die, they're going to come to my funeral, and they're going to be like, yeah, all he said was purpose, outcomes, methods. Purpose, I'm so sick of that. Or they'll say, you know what? He was right. That crazy guy was right about one thing, and it's that alignment comes from purpose, alignment of purpose, alignment of outcomes, and alignment of methods. And if you have drama, then it's because you aren't aligned on one or more of these three things.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Totally. I mean, I almost see you gotta, yeah. I mean, you can't create the strategies and methods almost until you have that aligned purpose. You've got people who say, yep, we all agree. There's our purpose. And here are the outcomes we want to see. We all agree. Those are the outcomes we want to see. Yep. It's like a shared vision,
yes.
And then from there you say, okay, how are we all going to get there? And what are we all going to contribute? What methods, what strategies? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so many, as you said, so many groups, particularly collaborative groups, go right into the strategies, go right into actions before they're even thinking of that shared vision.
Yep. And I don't let my students
fail.
Yeah. Well, if you succeed, it's on accident almost at that point.
Yeah, right.
So like just little things. I have my students, whenever they have a meeting, they have to have an agenda. I don't let them meet unless they have an agenda. And on that agenda, they need to say, why are we meeting? What's the purpose? What outcomes do we want to have by the time we're done? Okay, then what methods are we going to use to get there?
Yeah.
And you use this method for the POM. I call it the POM model or POM model. You use it for writing a paper,
Yeah, that's great.
Planning a party. Yeah. Doing strategic planning in an organization. And I have a lot more to this, under methods. Even though methods is last, I'm not saying it's the least important at all by any means. Mm-hmm. And I break methods down into strategies, tactics, and action steps, and I have a whole way of mapping it out. But really, that's beyond the purpose of this chapter. This chapter is to really understand these three elements of purpose, outcomes, and methods. Any endeavor have these three elements, and purpose is first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's see. And I even have it visually illustrated. Purpose is why. Let's say you're building a bridge. Purpose is why you're building a bridge. Outcomes are to what end. And then methods, look at this. It just fits right in there, is the how in between the two. Yep. So you can use this slide if you're floored by the visuals of it. So I think this is bringing us to the end of our dealio, because I come back here and that's it. So let me stop the share and see what you think of all that.
I think it's great, and I actually appreciate now seeing your PowerPoint and breaking it down. When I first read the chapter, I thought, there's a lot to this, and how am I gonna? I had a hard time initially after I read it, kind of pulling out the key principles, and now this discussion and looking at your PowerPoint kind of helped me do that. So
Good.
It doesn't seem so overwhelming anymore
Yeah,
or
basically,
complex.
yes. And you only have a limited time, and you can't cover. Let's just call it what it is. You cannot cover everything that's in there,
Mm-mm.
in that chapter in your class. So pick a focus. You could focus on, the three types of purpose: original, personal, and situational. You could focus on the three core aspects: the discern, articulate, fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
You could focus on purpose, outcomes, methods. You could show one of the videos. You
Right.
could, you could just focus on personal purpose. You could just focus on that.
Right. Right. That's
So,
the challenge, is trying, because you can take it in so many different directions and it is limited time, trying to determine the best way to present it. 'Cause there are just, yeah, there are a lot of options and ways you can do it. So,
mhm. So I'm going to throw out there that I would say personal purpose would be a place that you can't lose on that one. Like if you had to just pick one focus, I think your participants will really enjoy that. It'll be meaningful for them to really think about it. Although, maybe not everybody's comfortable going there. I mean, then
mhm.
that's a deep kind of thing. So I think that's great. I think it's not even part of the chapter, but organizational purpose, talking about that would be really, really good. What is the purpose of the organization? And then maybe look at, okay, if that's the purpose, then walk them through what are the outcomes? All right, if those are the outcomes, then what are the best methods to getting there? And are you using those methods? So yeah, no shortage of things to do. And this is why I just want to say this real quick too. A lot of people are not, that's not true. A couple of people have said to me, Adam, the more I read Positive Leadership, so people who've used it for a couple of years now, they go back and reread it the second year and the third year. They say, it's like I get things out of there I totally missed the first time. There's pieces in there that aren't immediately discernible. And
Mhm.
and on one hand, I kind of wish that wasn't the case. I wish it was just super clear and couldn't be more clear, and there it is. But on the other hand, I kind of like that there's that depth to it, that you could come back to it and see something that you missed the first time, but still get something out of it the first time, but just come back and get something new the second time. One thing I don't want to have happen for you or for any of your other people watching this is I don't want your participants to say, oh, all of this has been said before. There's nothing new. They can insult this any way they want, but they cannot insult it in that way because that means they haven't read it. Because there's tons of stuff in here that hasn't been said before. I've read a lot about each of these capacities, and I have not to say I've done a complete exhaustive thing, but I've never come across someone talk about purpose in terms of discerning versus creating and asking that question, or the discern, articulate, fulfill model. I mean, there's just new things that anybody who comes to this from any background, no matter how much they've read, will find something in here new. And if they say there's nothing new in here, then they just got an attitude. They're just being lazy. Don't accept that, and tell them to call me if that's their concern. Now they can say other concerns like what a stupid example, or this guy's crazy, or whatever, but they cannot say there's nothing new. All right, I'm off that.
All right.
All right.
I'll keep that in mind. I'm sending that to you.
Send them to me. Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, any thoughts or questions? I think we've kind of gone here for quite a little bit. I want to be sensitive to your time and the viewers' time.
Yeah, I actually have one, and I have not yet looked too closely at the implementation guide or the field guide for this particular capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering if there's any exercises in there around how you begin to discern, because I think really around personal purpose, I think that's where people get hung up, is they don't even know how to begin to understand what their personal purpose is.
Right.
they've been at a job for 15 years, they've been in a marriage for 12 years, whatever it is, and it just becomes their reality, and reality becomes their purpose, even though really there's a lot of times we're not living in alignment with our purpose, and we think we are.
Yes.
So like that, I think would be interesting if there were any exercises or
sure
at that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll come at this. I pulled up the field guide for purpose. And so this is a great question. I didn't have any preparedness for it. But like this exercise of what's on your plate, this is a really good idea to really think about, are the things that we have on our plate related to our personal purpose, or maybe it's a situational purpose or something, but just really evaluating the things on our plate.
Mm-hmm.
What do we spend our time doing? And to what degree are those things, because that's what we're investing. When we invest our time into something, we're investing our life. As Ben Franklin said, "Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff of which life is made." I don't know that. I don't think Ben Franklin talked like that, but it's just like,
right, yeah,
really good stuff. Here's a little bit about the alignment of purpose, outcomes, and methods, and just a little walkthrough. I mean, there's a lot more to say than what's on this sheet, but this is actually about, too often organizations do what they've always done. So to really think about your work, and, you'll have people who own their own businesses or in charge of projects or whatever, and to think about it, have your board at Leadership South Coast go through this exercise and clarify the purpose and what are the outcomes that would tell us we're fulfilling that purpose, and then what methods have we chosen to fulfill that purpose, and are there other methods?
That'd be a great exercise to do, even again, to send them off between this month and next, and say, get together with your teams. In our case, we have project teams.
Yes.
This exercise for your project.
How wonderful. What a great follow-up to that first exercise of your user's manual. Mm-hmm. And then that's about you individually, and each individual sharing what matters to them in the work they do. And then now as a group coming together on a shared purpose, outcomes, and methods. You're a genius, Jennifer. That's a great idea. Purpose roadmaps. I don't know what this one is. I don't remember. I guess this is again about really gauging, your organizational purpose. It's geared towards that. Here is something about personal purpose.
Yeah, this is a good one. Yeah.
It's tough. Identifying personal purpose is just, gosh, it's so difficult, and I don't ever want to make it sound easy, but it's such an important thing to do, and it's actually an act of continual revising. There's no such thing as doing it one time, right, and then coming up with it again. I know for me it was really valuable. I did like all these values clarification exercise. I have this document. It is, if you read it, you would say, "Oh my gosh, Adam, you are so noble. That these are your values." And I wrote it as, I truly aspire to those things. But if I look at the way I really lived my life, that document does not reflect the way I really live my life. So people do values exercises, and they're talking about their ideal, which is great, but you also have to talk about the reality of based on how you live your life. For me, I never put on my original noble sounding list of values that comfort was one of my top values. That's not a noble value. But if I look at how I live my day-to-day life, comfort is like a really high value based on what I practice. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying that it's tough to take a look at yourself and really be accurate about it. And it's very tough to identify your own purpose. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to do. It's like, I heard it once said that it's like trying to bite your own teeth. I know. About that one. This idea of identifying the golden thread. This is what helped me. What was the thing that was always of interest to me and that I was always fascinated with at the various stages of my life? And it was always about this thing. It was about purpose. It was about meaningful living and helping people live life in a meaningful way, helping myself, trying to figure it out for myself. That's the common thread for me. And so I've always been interested in books about this, or I get inspired by movies that are about this, or, you know, things like that. When I talk about it, I get excited and animated. Write a letter to your personal purpose. This might be kind of weird and dumb, but just there's no format here. It's just, dear personal purpose, where the hell are you? Dear personal purpose, I'm sorry I let you down. Dear personal purpose, I'm so glad I found you. You know, like, and just see where it goes from there. Going through your day, event by event, and looking at the intention of each event. I heard it called by another body of knowledge called segment intending. Each segment of your day has a different intention. And to recognize that and know that, for example, after this call, you're going to move to a different segment of your day, and I'm going to move to a different segment of my day. And the purpose is going to be very different than what the purpose for this call was. And so to really get clear at the beginning of each segment on the purpose of it, to practice mentally. I'm driving to work. I'm about to head into work in that segment. I got a meeting. What's going on there? I'm leaving the meeting and I'm getting ready to go to a lunch thing. What's my purpose there? You know, to practice clarifying. And then these basic questions come from this book, Creativity in Business, which is a Stanford kind of book. And so these are just really good questions to consider. Clarity through, so there's a lot.
There's a ton of exercises. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Thank you. There's plenty there to work from.
Plenty. Good. Plenty. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up there.
All right.
And this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing these videos for you. So we'll do next month with a recap of what you decided to do with purpose. How did it go? And then we'll talk about advocacy.
Excellent. And our purpose will align with our education day. So yeah, I think it's a nice alignment of topic and capacity. So
such a good point, guys. When you're planning your yearly schedule, don't move you got to keep the capacities in order, and just keep your topic days in order too, and see how they match up in the first year. Then in the second year, if you think that there might be some engineering you could do to better match them up, great, do that, but don't move your topics around. Don't move the positive leadership capacities around. I know that's kind of arrogant to say, but do not move the positive leadership capacities. You can't do that. There's a reason why they're in the order they're in. So just discover that first year, see how they mesh, and then the second year if you want to tailor it. But it always will come together in very interesting and exciting and unexpected ways. So,
yeah.
All right.
All right, Adam, thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Talk to you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.